President Trump openly says I'm going to impose tariff on so-and-so country of so-and-so percentage. But the Indian government has been silent. Only the bureaucracy has been pushed to negotiate, and ultimately nothing comes out of it. And then the Prime Minister unilaterally decides that he knows better how to handle this situation. America is not concerned with our horrible situation. They want to just limit the Indian imports into their country because they feel or they have said so that India imposes very high tariffs on American products. So that was the basis on which the Americans imposed tariffs. Because the political leadership has agreed for the 18 plus % of tariff. That is non-negotiable. We cannot change the American imposed tariffs because we have accepted that as the basis for the bilateral trade agreement. So in that way, the political leadership has accepted defeat even before the trade agreement is.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. Amid ongoing India-US trade deal talks, the Office of the United States Trade Representative, that is USTR, has named India among countries that have unfair trade practices. Based on these findings, the USTR has proposed imposing additional tariffs ranging from 10% to 12.5% on imports from affected countries. Now, the USTR released the outcome of 60 investigations conducted under Section 301, identifying India among 54 economies that, according to its assessment, do not have adequate measures in place to prohibit or effectively prevent the import of goods allegedly producing using forced labor. Now, the development comes as senior trade officials from the US and India are engaged in a 3-day round of discussions in New Delhi aimed at advancing proposed bilateral trade agreement. Now, what does this entire USTR additional tariffs mean? Now, what USTR exactly has said, I'm just going to explain that a bit and then go to our guest. Now, in a notification, USTR has said that countries that already enforce a ban on imports linked to forced labor have committed to introducing and implementing such measures under a reciprocal trade arrangement or operate a partial framework that restricts the entry of certain goods produced through forced labor would face an additional tariff of 10%. For countries that do not meet these criteria, the proposed additional duty has been at 12.5%. Now, the USTR has also suggested a separate mechanism for textiles and apparel that would permit a specified volume of imports from selected economies to enter the US market at a lower section 301 tariff rate. So, what does this all mean for India? For all the claims that Donald Trump is a very good friend to Prime Minister Modi, what do these additional tariffs mean? And what does it mean in terms of the geopolitics playing out between India and America? Joining me this evening is international affairs expert and diplomat, Professor Aftab Kemal Pasha. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining. And my first question to you is that while these trade negotiations are happening between India and America, and here you have a bombshell of additional tariffs, what is America trying to do? It's still playing on a double word. And one doesn't know how America is treating. On one hand, they want all the trade negotiations. They want India to invest. But when it comes to giving concessions to India, they are not ready to give those concessions.
Yeah, as your viewers are aware, President Trump, even during his election campaign in 24, had promised sweeping tariffs to many countries which he accused them of taking undue advantage of the big market America has for their products. And soon after becoming president for the second term last year, January, he imposed varying degrees of tariffs. 25% for India, then additional 25% for buying Russian oil, and he threatened 150% for China, Mexico, Canada, left and right. But the matter was taken to the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, and on 20th February this year, the Supreme Court ruled against President Trump's sweeping reciprocal tariffs, which he had initially imposed under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers. So after that, to retain his determination to keep the tariffs, what he had announced, President Trump announced a 10% tariff on all countries for 150 days. That is up to July, starting from 24th of February this 2026. So the tariffs, which were in varying degrees imposed, say 18% on India and 50% on Brazil, like that, different tariff ranges. Now, uniformly on all the countries, it is 10%.
No,
So,
but
in the light of
you remember Marco Rubio was here in India recently. Do you remember anything coming out in the public domain that did Marco Rubio tell Prime Minister Modi, or were there discussions that India will be levied some additional tariffs of 12.5%? Was it discussed? Did it come out in the public domain at that time?
no, it has come out only recently. Their investigation report came out recently, and Marco Rubio perhaps was not informed about it. But he did raise the issue of India buying products worth $500 billion, which Prime Minister had agreed last year during his February visit. So they are harping on that again and again. And the trade delegation led by the American negotiator, that is Brendan Lynch, he will be talking with India's chief negotiator, Darpan Jain, additional secretary in the Ministry of Commerce, to tie up an interim trade agreement as part of the bilateral trade agreement on a long-term basis. So negotiations in New Delhi have already started, and perhaps this issue may come up of additional 12.5 tariff, which may go beyond 30%, which is quite high, quite steep, and it will affect many industries. Already, the earlier imposition of tariffs of 25 plus 25 had affected many hosieries and the textile industries and others. But now, if this is implemented, this is basically on countries which are accused of having forced labor, like the Chinese. They use the Uyghur Muslim as forced labor to work in their factories and reforming their ideology, so on and so forth. In India, also, child labor is accused of being involved in many products which are exported to the United States. So they are very strict. They are bracketed to many of their Western allies also in this Canada
Right.
and some European countries. So India is not only the only country which
No,
is
just
targeted.
what you have explained, just to give a little perspective to the viewers as to what this additional, from where has this additional tariff come? Now, Washington began the investigation after the US Supreme Court struck down Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. Now, Trump then introduced a new 10% global tariff structure that effectively replaced the emergency tariffs invalidated by the Supreme Court. Now, the development comes as Indian negotiators are holding talks with US counterparts in New Delhi to finalize a bilateral trade agreement. Now, the question is, Professor Pasha, that can the Indian side not speak to Donald Trump that why on earth, when we are ready to invest so much in America, at least do away with these tariffs? Why levy an additional burden on us. As it is, we are facing such a big crisis as far as oil and gas is concerned. There are so many, and the country is going through a horrifyingly terrible time. At least Prime Minister Modi can talk his heart out with Donald Trump. I'm sure he would understand.
No, America is not concerned with our horrible situation. They want to just limit the Indian imports into their country because they feel, or they have said so, that India imposes very high tariffs on American products. So that was the basis on which the Americans imposed tariffs.
No, but what I don't
And
understand today also there were reports. In fact, Bloomberg had reported that India had to sell off 1 lakh crore of gold holdings, and that was in the first 2 weeks of May. Apparently, RBI then rejected that report. But the thing is that something has really gone wrong, and if RBI was denying that story, then RBI website data only shows that they have the gold holdings data till April. So, which means that there is an element of truth, which was reported by Bloomberg, saying that India was in such a terrible stress, economic stress, that they had to sell off the gold holdings. Now, can these points not be discussed between Trump and Prime Minister Modi to get a
no,
waiver, to get a
we can discuss, we can tell the United States about the impact on Indian economy of the tariffs, but unfortunately, nothing has been said by our leaders. Like President Trump openly says, "I'm going to impose tariff on so and so country of so and so percentage." But the Indian government has been silent. Only the bureaucracy has been pushed to negotiate, and ultimately nothing comes out of it. And then the prime minister unilaterally decides that he knows better how to handle this situation. Last time also there was this deadlock between the American trade representative and Indian bureaucrats. So it was the prime minister's office which intervened and solved the issue. Like that, they have become used to intervention by the prime minister or his office, and these tariffs are one-sided. See, they are imposing on us, and we are not imposing any tariffs. We have removed an entire tariff regime on American products, and we have agreed to import agricultural products and genetically modified dairy products, aircrafts, engines, whole host of petrochemicals and precious metals, so on and so forth. There is a long list of items we have agreed to import.
But if you look at from the common man's perspective, isn't this a very obvious question that what kind of trade talks are these when we can't even open our mouth and discuss that why do we need these additional levies when we are ready and we are agreeing to all the terms what America is wanting? Piyush Goyal the other day, the Commerce Minister said that, yeah, now we are only working on commas and full stops. More or less everything has been worked around. But the point is that is the Indian side even speaking? Are they even opening their mouth as to what is good for the country?
Yeah, the bureaucrats are discussing, issues like market access. What India will have additional areas, non-tariff measures, customs and trade facilitation, investment promotion, and economic security alignment. These are the issues they are talking, not on reduction, because the political leadership has agreed for the 18 plus percent of tariff. That is non-negotiable. We cannot change the American imposed tariffs because we have accepted that as the basis for the bilateral trade agreement. Whereas that should have been questioned. Just as we are not imposing tariff, we should have insisted on reciprocal tariffs, which means zero. But unfortunately, our weak leadership has accepted as if that is a big boon. From the 50%, now they reduced to 18.5%. So they thought this is a big achievement for the Modi government, and they are happy with that, whereas we are giving 0% open market for American products, which is lopsided. So in that way, the political leadership has accepted defeat even before the trade agreement is signed. And now on top of 18.5, if 12.5% is also imposed, that will mean a steep increase, almost 30%. And our resources will go in one way to the United States, and we will get very
And
little from our
recently,
exports.
Marco Rubio also said that he will not let India buy oil from Russia, the cheap oil. It cannot continue to buy cheap oil from Russia. So, what is
Yeah,
India going to do?
the other point about gold which you mentioned, that is related to the depleting foreign exchange reserves due to high oil and gas prices. We
Yes.
have been scouting all over the world for oil and gas because of the Hormuz Iran crisis, and we are now buying a basket of oil and gas, which is almost $157, whereas the average global oil price is little over 100. So we are paying, additional almost $50 for every barrel of oil we are importing either from the United States or from Brazil or from Argentina or Nigeria, because the transport cost, the insurance cost, and various other factors, get added up to the oil, which is already over $100, $112. So we are depleting our foreign exchange reserves faster, and our dollar holding, because if you have to buy oil in international market, you have to have dollars. So our dollar reserves, the entire foreign exchange is not in dollars. It is in different currencies basket, like the euros and yuan or whatever. So the dollar reserves got depleted, and so we had to sell gold and buy dollars, like what we did in the Kuwait crisis in 1990-91, when VP Singh and Chandrasekhar government faced huge oil price increase because of the Kuwait crisis. So in that way, now we are saddled with huge this oil bill to maintain the supply, because we are the third largest buyer of crude oil. So we have to pay in the current market prices, because what was signed in January, February, it reached lower prices. But since February 28th, we have been signing contracts in the hope that this will reduce the burden for the Indian people. But ultimately, four times the government had to increase by selling gold. We are buying foreign exchange, that is dollars, and to keep buying the high-priced oil, because we have become so weak in our foreign policy, and we are cozying up in relations with US, which is export expensive oil and gas. And Israel is of no use because it has no oil and little gas, which it self uses and partly exports to neighboring countries or
No,
to
but
Europe.
these additional levies are for the unfair labor practices, not only in India but in
Forced
59
labor.
countries. That's what forced labor. Forced labor. What does it mean in terms of the way a developed country like America is looking on India when it comes to forced labor practices? What does it mean for the various sectors of the industries which are operating in India? Which means that today America is looking at additional levies because of the forced labor practices. Tomorrow there would be some other country who would look down on India on this. Can we not improve? Can we not have a dialogue with America on this so that these kind of tariffs are not levied on us, and at least we should be seen in a clearer light rather than seeing as a country which is practicing forced labor?
Yeah, you see, this forced labor is a very dicey subject, and we have asked for report in what sectors, in what fields America has identified Indian forced labor as the cause for additional tariffs to be imposed after July 7th public hearing. But it is well known that in some sectors like textiles or carpet weaving in UP and Kashmir and other places, even in Gujarat, there is this evidence which lot of NGOs and foreign civil society groups have produced, where children below the age of 14 or 12, which they have identified, 16 I think is the age, below 16, if children are employed in any industry, whether it is carpet or handloom, uh, other textiles industries.
No,
So
but
this,
this is also like heaping another insult on India. While levying additional taxes because of forced labor practices, is this not insulting India again?
yeah, that is because we have not enacted similar laws in by our parliament. You see, in America, you have forced labor there. It is not that it is confined to non-American countries like India or China. In America, also it is done, and we can pass our legislation and say forced labor by the Mexicans or the Latin Americans who are forced to work in agriculture sector, construction sectors, and various other industries. Even this dry fruits which we import, there also child labor is involved. The whole Mexican family is involved there. Children, instead of going to schools, they are working in the American farms, picking up almonds and other dry fruits. But we are so weak. We cannot pass legislation and we cannot enforce tariffs on them because of the stand taken by political leadership. Whereas China has done that. China has passed legislation and prohibiting American products there, and they stick to it. They will not budge. Tit for tat, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The Chinese have
So you are saying that
taken this position.
India doesn't have a legal or a geopolitical bandwidth to resist these kind of levies due to the forced labor practice.
Yes, that is the major problem. But the legislation can be passed, and which we have given 0% tariff to America. We can say we have evidence that child labor or forced labor is used in American agriculture products, so we will not import, whether it is apples or almonds or any other fruit or agriculture products, because in agriculture whites don't work in American farms. It is the Mexicans and other poorer people who come as illegal refugees. It is they who work, and the entire family
So,
work.
but you are saying that India can point this out to America, right?
Not only point out, you must pass legislation and say we have evidence and we will not import. We will impose reciprocal tariffs. If you are threatening with 12.5 additional tariffs, we will also import. So in that way, we can bargain and reduce our rate of tariffs, which this government is not showing the resolve in this connection. Thank you.
No, but would you say that this is resolve, or would you say that lack of guts to speak in front of America?
Yeah, lack of political will on the part of the leadership. They have not thought about imposing tariffs because they are scared. They are scared of the American threat, and instead of diversifying our markets, we seem America is the only heaven for our exports. Whereas China has diversified to Afro-Asian countries, Latin American countries. We have been sleeping on this, and we have allowed America to impose these tariffs. Thank you.
All right,
I have
Professor
to go.
Pasha, thank you so much for joining. Thank you.